Hai Bapak Ibu Guru Bahasa Inggris, semoga semuanya baik-baik saja. My name is Ali and today we are going to experience professional development by answering one popular question in distance learning or PJJ. The question is, bagaimana kita menentukan materi di buku yang harus kita ajarkan di PJJ? Let's start. One popular question that we often ask ourselves in teaching adalah, ini materinya banyak sekali dalam satu buku, ada banyak sekali halaman di buku-buku itu. Bahkan in face-to-face teaching itu tidak bisa tercapai sepenuhnya. We cannot cover all of those pages, all of those materials in 1 year in a face-to-face teaching. Let alone now we have distance learning. Live session sering kita anggap tidak begitu efektif in our teaching. But then, how do we finish the material in PJJ? Bagian mana dari materi buku yang harus kita ajarkan di PJJ? Dan bagaimana menentukan bagian itu? Jawaban pendeknya adalah bagian-bagian yang membantu siswa mencapai tujuan pembelajaran. Bagaimana caranya kita tahu bagian-bagian itu? I have 3 tips for you. Yang pertama, rubah mindset bahwa teaching adalah menyelesaikan materi. No, teaching is not finishing the material. I am sure sekarang Bapak Ibu sudah merasakan bahwa teaching untuk menyelesaikan materi is not correct, is not right, it's useless. Ini karena memang pada dasarnya teaching is not about finishing the material. An effective teaching is teaching that reaches, that achieves learning objective. Pengajaran yang efektif adalah pengajaran yang mencapai tujuan pelajaran. Tips yang kedua, read teacher's guide. Read teacher's guide especially on information on learning objectives. Saya yakin buku-buku yang Bapak Ibu gunakan saat ini punya teacher guide-nya. Teacher's guide will show you all the things that we need to know about learning objectives for students to achieve. Beberapa guru memilih tidak melihat teacher's guide untuk lesson flow because they think that, they have everything on the student book. Well, maybe, but for the precise answer untuk exact guide, read the teacher's book. Jadi gunanya teacher's book bukan hanya untuk melihat kunci jawaban ya Pak, Bu. I strongly recommend that you read teacher's guide, especially on information about the learning objectives. Those information can be useful for us, for you to decide what to teach. Tips yang ketiga. One unit can have many objectives, but only some are their main objectives. The rest are the supporting objectives. Jadi tips yang ketiga adalah choose the main objectives and then you go to the materials and choose materials that directly support those main objectives. Dan bagaimana cara tahu soal objektif ini? Go back to tips number 2. Read the teacher's guide. Teacher's guide will tell you which objectives are main objectives and which are supporting objectives. Kalaupun nggak langsung tertera ini main objectives-nya, ini supporting objectives-nya, at least we can get clues from the teacher's guide which are the main objectives, and then we can go to the book and choose materials yang langsung mengarah to the main objectives. Now, Bapak Ibu, let's put those 3 tips into the books so that we can see how those 3 tips can help you decide which materials you need to teach in PJJ. Ya, mari langsung kita praktekkan tips-tipsnya itu ke dalam buku. Today I have 2 books. One is for the primary level, the other one is for the secondary level. Jadi biar dapat young learners-nya dan juga dapat teenage learners-nya. Okay, the first book that we're going to look at would be the one published by Pearson. The book is titled Pop Tropica. Let's take a look at the book. Okay, so now we're looking at the teacher guide of Pop Tropica Level 1, Unit 1. Okay, so this is a book for first graders. And we're going to apply the 3 tips that we talked about earlier into this book. So the first tip would be, remember, changing our mindset from teaching materials into achieving objective. Changing mindsets, checked, ready. Tips number 2, read the teacher guide on information about learning objectives. As you can see on your screen, so this book is pretty straightforward, really. You have the title of the unit, and then you have the unit overview, and it directly states the unit objective. So the objective of the unit is for students to be able to talk about colors and numbers. Okay, but let's not stop there. Remember, we have to get the full understanding of the objectives of the lesson. So let's read further down below. So you have information here on what language aspects that this book talk about in this unit. So you have target, you can see the target vocabulary, you can see the target structures, as well as the features. Okay, so the target vocabularies are colors and also numbers as what is required from the lesson objectives, and then these are the target structures. And now you have features. Well, you have values, cross-curricular, as well as phonics. Were they designed to help students reach the objective? Yes, they were also designed for students to reach the objectives. They were also used to recycle knowledge. But in this case, if you have to teach PJJ or distance learning, these are the things that you probably need to sacrifice. Now you have skills, yada yada yada. Okay, don't worry about those skills, because each book is designed so that everything falls comprehensively if students meet the objective. So just focus on the objective. And then you have the lessons. Okay. Okay, so here you have a snippet of the student book inside the teacher guide. It makes it easier for you to, see what you have to teach and then see how you're supposed to teach it. So you have here the learning objective. So this is the learning objectives of lesson 1. It's a part of the bigger objective. Okay. Now we'll go on to the next lesson. So this is lesson 2. Okay, and if I were you, I would read everything until I got a big idea or big picture of how the book was written. Okay, and here, this is the last lesson, lesson 10. Okay, so now that we know that this lesson is actually divided into 10 lessons, 10 mini lessons, which its own objectives, but we also understand that those objectives actually go up to students being able to talk about colors and numbers. So that's the most important objectives. Okay, now step 3. Step 3 would be choosing the main objectives and also the important materials to support that objectives. Now for this example, it's very clear. The objectives would be, I can talk about colors and numbers. Then our job has to be choosing the most important materials to support the objectives. In this case, we need the materials who teach target vocabulary and target structures. And those two objectives, those two materials can be found here in this part of the book. Yeah, you see here, there's a part called look. So you have the question and answer that talks about numbers as well as color later on. This is the first part, and then this is the second part. If I have to teach PJJ using this book, I will most likely focus on those pages. Okay, that's the first example. Okay, Bapak Ibu, now let's take a look at the second example. For this one, I will be using a book called When English Rings a Bell. This is the book that our government suggests us to use for English lessons. This is for grade 7. Okay, so let's take a look at the book. So I'm using the chapter 6 as the example, and the title of chapter 6 is We Love What We Do. So let's take a look at the material. This is the learning objectives, and then you have several pages on the material. Okay, now let's practice the tips. The first tip, remember, change our mindset from teaching the materials into teaching the objectives. Mindset change, checked. Good. Now, step 2. Step 2 would be to look at the teacher guide and also specifically on information on learning objectives. So before I go on to the teacher guide, well, this book is pretty straightforward as well. So you see, this is the objectives that you can see in the student book. So we will learn to ask for and give information related to actions, functions of people, animals, and things in order to identify, to criticize, or praise them. Let's go to the teacher guide then. This is the teacher guide of chapter 6. We love what we do, right? So you have the competency dasar, yada yada yada. So you have this one. So basically this lesson is going to be divided into 3 parts, and the three objectives are the main objectives. So it's pretty straightforward, right? Okay, tips number 3 would be choose the main objectives and important materials that support the objective. This book has what we call as peta kegiatan pembelajaran. Basically, these are the teaching steps suggested by the books for teachers to follow. But you see, it's quite long. It follows the stages, the scientific stages that our government expects teachers to use in teaching. So let's focus on the people first, yeah? So you see, these are the stages to reach the objectives of the lesson about people. Now, I think this is important, okay? Bermain peran, melakukan percakapan tentang pekerjaan dan tindakan terkait, okay? And I think this is also important. Menanyakan pekerjaan orang tua, bapak dan ibu ke 5 orang teman sekelas. And of course this one, mempresentasikan information. I think it's supposed to be talking about, you know, making dialogues about people and also their job. So, you know, for me, these are the important steps to follow. But do you have to follow all of these steps? Well, you know what, if you can, why not? But remember, you're doing it online, so you need to be extra careful in which materials that you have to choose. Remember, you should only choose materials that support the objectives. So Bapak Ibu, let's go back to the first question that I asked at the beginning of this video. Bagaimana kita menentukan materi di buku yang harus kita ajarkan di PJJ? The short answer would be bagian yang penting untuk membantu siswa mencapai tujuan pembelajaran. Again, we need to teach the important parts, okay, of the materials that help students achieve the objectives, the learning objective. And the 3 tips for that is, number 1, change your mindset from teaching the materials to achieving learning objectives. Number 2, read the teacher guide, especially on information about lesson objectives. And number 3, if you have a lot of objectives, choose the main objectives and then take a look at the important materials that can support students in achieving the objectives. So those are the 3 tips for me. Good luck.